Welcome back. We're discussing the Indian elections today on Inside Story. India, a country with growing international influence, but one where local issues may well be the ones which decide who takes this enormous country forward. We're going to have a look at some of those issues right now. Security, of course, high on the agenda. And the current opposition, the NDA, has focused strongly on this issue, particularly, of course, in light of the Mumbai attacks in 2008. The NDA sees those attacks as what they would say evidence of the government being ineffectual in cracking down on terrorism. Almost just as important as security, though, is corruption, rampant in local government, to the point where 128 of the current 543 MPs elected have been criminally charged, and get this, 84 of them cases of murder, 17 of robbery, 28 cases of theft and extortion, and apparently 16% of the current candidates have got criminal records as well. It's extraordinary. One shouldn't forget the external issues, though, things like the disputed Kashmir region, tense relations with Pakistan, also ties with the United States, and even India's relationship with Afghanistan, which in turn impacts on things, of course, with Pakistan. Let's discuss all of these issues with our guests in New Delhi. Prananjoy Guha-Tharkutta, also in New Delhi, Anil Padmanabhan, and in Washington, D.C. is Rani Malan. Thanks for staying with us, everyone. Mr. Prananjoy in New Delhi, let me come to you first. Talk to you about security. It's got to be confronted, doesn't it? Especially by the UPA.
Kamal.
Oh, sure.
Okay, Kamal, before I talk about the issues, I want to add a few points to what was said before you took a break in the program by Rani and by Anil. Essentially, you know, personalities matter, but it's not a US presidential kind of election, Manmohan Singh versus LK Advani. Yes, the polity has fragmented. Roughly 60% of those eligible to vote have voted in the last 4 general elections since 1996. Now, half the votes have been cast in favor of either the Congress or the BJP, the two large political parties. Since the glass can be half empty or half full, you can say half the people who voted in India did not vote for either the Congress or the BJP. Sure. Therefore, what we're not really seeing is a bipolar kind of a situation, but a multipolar situation, which makes the situation very, very fluid and the possibilities immense. Now, let's talk about this issue of national security or terrorism that you talked about. Yes, after 26/11 Mumbai, a section within the BJP sought to highlight this whole issue of terror and national security. And they have their own form of what I would describe as belligerent nationalism. It certainly did not influence the voters, say, in the national capital of Delhi, when there were provincial elections or local elections, where the Congress returned to power for the 3rd time in a row. In my opinion, whereas security or terrorism is an issue, it transcends political parties. You know, we have this game going on where the Congress says the BJP was soft on terror, the BJP says the Congress has been soft on terror. I think the ordinary voter in this country is smarter than what many politicians imagine they are. And I think they realize that these issues go beyond politics. The issues that do matter to the voter.
Sorry to interrupt you, you don't think UPA would be in a better position had Mumbai not happened, or had it been able to deal more effectively with Mumbai?
I personally don't think it's such an important issue. I don't think it's half as important an issue as, say, inflation or job losses, the state of the economy. I think these are issues that directly affect ordinary people, their livelihoods. You know, you talk about national security. I think livelihood security, job security, even energy security is perhaps more important. That's my view.
Okay, then, and we will talk more about those in a moment. I'll just ask Rani Malan over in Washington, D.C. for her thoughts on the security issue. I guess we, particularly in the media and outside of India, see Mumbai as such a huge event that we think must have had a huge impact and would have a huge impact on these elections. What do you think?
Well, you know, I think the security issues are more pertinent for urban voters, particularly the upper middle class. Let's not forget, before these Mumbai attacks, there were a couple of years previous to that larger attacks. More people were killed in previous terrorist attacks. But what was shocking about this was, of course, that it was linked to people who came from the outside, were able to fan out in Mumbai and get into, you know, hotels where the upper middle class take refuge. So while it has played much in the international press, and it was the issue in terms of how the Indian government was able to react or not able to react so well, I don't think it's going to be a driving issue for the average Indian voter.
Okay, let's go to Anil Padmanabhan in New Delhi, of course the editor of a financial newspaper. So let's talk the economy with you. Tell me first of all, just give me a précis, if you will, of how bad things are in India with regards to a global economic crisis.
See, compared to the rest of the world, it's not too bad in India. But having said that, I think there are two levels at which you should look at the Indian economy. One is, of course, the segment of the economy which is linked to the rest of the world, which is largely an urban linkage, which we have seen that has been established. But on the other side, you have rural India. Now, rural India hasn't done too badly partly because the government's heavy spending that has happened under these employment programs, as well as the fact that there's been a global commodity boom. So overall, Indian agriculture and rural India hasn't done too badly and therefore have not been so severely impacted. But in urban India, it's a different story. And just like Rani mentioned on the security issue, it's again one among the many local issues that will impact across the metropolises in the country. So you have a situation now that an economic slowdown means different things to rural India and a different thing to urban India.
So is there a way that one can help the other, or am I being too idealistic there? If the rural sector is doing well, is there a way it can impact itself on the urban area? And is that something the government would need to do to help, whichever this new government ends up being, to help move things forward?
Yeah, definitely. They have to keep the rural momentum going. At this point, you have had a shock in terms of the commodity boom is kind of tapered off. So you have that impetus is slowing down. So the issue is now if the next government has the fiscal room to continue spending on rural development programs as well as rural employment programs. So if they continue that, then rural India continues to demand consumer products and other kinds of durables, which in a way sustains overall corporate growth and thereby benefits urban India. So yes, definitely there's a linkage and there is a need to focus on that.
Mr. Pranjoy in New Delhi, I want to talk about the corruption issue, because these figures, when I read them, really, I mean, the headline figures just hit you. 23% of MPs have been criminally charged. 16% of candidates have criminal records as well. It sounds extraordinary. Is it as bad as it sounds?
No, I think, you know, when you look at it from far away, you tend to get a little alarmed. Now, many of these politicians who've been charged with criminal offences, they claim that these charges are trumped up, that they're politically motivated. I'm not going into the merits or otherwise of these claims. There are others who are, quote unquote, like Robin Hood. I don't want to in any way downplay the significance of the criminalization of the political system in this country. You know, I mean, the role of big money, the role of corrupt money, all of it is undoubtedly important. But the question is, you have to also keep in mind that in the over the last 12 years, 40% of the members of parliament have not been re-elected. So there are very, very strong anti-incumbency sentiments across the country. So the average Indian voter, she may be poor, she may be illiterate, but she can distinguish between the good guy and the not so good guy. And she and he exercises his or her franchise very, very wisely. So it's not as if the scenario is as bleak as it may appear. There are some positive trends, which is not to say that, you know, every single one of the 543 members of the lower house of parliament in India is a saint or a good guy. I mean, we've got our share of pretty nasty characters in parliament too.
Internationally speaking, though, and I'll put this to Rani Mullen, seeing as she is outside of India, when you hear sort of headline numbers like that, and we say an admission there from Mr. Pranjoy that it's not really, there are problems there, does it put a stain on this great democratic process, this 500 plus MPs in the parliament?
I think it is shocking, you know, in the West here from the outside to hear such kind of numbers, but I would agree with the other commentator that in India, when you look at how this plays in the press and the local news, it does not seem to affect how the majority of the people vote or indeed view many of their candidates. There again, you know, it goes back to local politics, local issues. And I don't think in the end it detracts from what is really an electoral exercise in the largest democracy, as you mentioned. I mean, the numbers are just staggering, you know, over 700 million eligible voters. And the fact that you have a poor developing country where you've had decades of a history of decades of elections that have taken place that have been peaceful, which is another thing, you know, looking from the outside. Some people have asked me, you know, we don't hear much about the Indian elections. Well, in many ways, that's a good thing, because I think there's a understanding that, you know, this is not going to produce a huge change in India. Indian elections tend to be peaceful. They tend to be more or less free and fair, and people do not expect them to be violent, to produce a huge change. And so in many ways, the fact that it is not getting the coverage that, say, right, as the upcoming elections, say, in Afghanistan, are making.
I'm going to jump in there because I've only got a couple of minutes left on this show, and I just want to get a very quick thought from each of you, a prediction. I'm going to put you on the spot. Tell me what you think is going to happen. We start with Anil Padmanabhan, who is in New Delhi. Your prediction for the election?
I would, like I said earlier in the show, that bet on some kind of third front formation along with the Congress coming to power at the centre.
Mr. Pranjoy?
I'm not a soothsayer. I'm not an astrologer. This election is a psephologist's nightmare. So I'll pass that question.
Oh, go on.
I'll say
no, go on. Give me a prediction.
Oh, no. No. I think it could be anybody's guess. I mean, don't forget that in April 1999, the government of the day lost a vote of confidence out of 543 members by 1 vote. Now, you can't get any closer than that in a democracy,
fair
right?
enough. It can get
so
pretty
anything
close.
is possible, okay?
Just quickly, Rani Mullen, last thought from you.
You know, I just want to mention that the redistricting that has taken place, first time in 30 years, I believe, in India, has not gotten enough attention. And so really, most of the polls seem to be showing some kind of coalition with the Congress party. But I do think that this is an election where, you know, anything might be possible. But I would also bet on a Congress-led coalition.
Fascinating discussion for a fascinating election. Thanks to all our guests, Paranjoy Guha-Terkutta in New Delhi, also Anil Padmanabhan there, and Rani Mullen in Washington, D.C. Thanks for your time, and thank you to our viewers for joining us here on Inside Story. You can send us your comments and your suggestions. That's the email address, insidestory@aljazeera.net. From the whole team, goodbye for now.